but there are not many. Of course, a report was published, or an article came out just this week, say there are only 17 black women professors in the country. The figures are somewhere between 50 and 80, I think, total, something like that. Generally, not necessarily that being a professor is, the be all and end all. Like everybody has to be a professor, but it's an indication of difficulties. I mean, for example, in my university, when you get promoted, they write these little bios about all of us who were promoted to professor. So I was looking at my colleagues when they were promoted, even though I've only been there for a few years and so on. And all of them were promoted from reader, 3 years, 5 years, 6 years. I was a reader more or less for 11 years, which is twice nearly the length of time of nearly all my colleagues. I don't draw any conclusions from that necessarily. They're all much more eminent than I am. But yes, there are these difficulties. But again, you don't go away. And these things can be accomplished.
I was kind of curious about the very the number of people into history, and if there's any kind of coalition between African historians in Africa and the UK and the American, so that there's this kind of network that would help to maybe encourage Africans in Africa and the UK to maybe focus on see how we can have a number of people in history.
Well, one aim of holding the conference is to begin to consider what the factors are. When I say people, when I talk about people studying history, I'm not talking about people studying African history. I'm talking about just people studying history. Of course, the teaching and provision of African history courses in Britain also isn't great, you could say. So we're talking about just those who are studying history. But yeah, one of the things we need to look at is what are the factors which prevent people studying history? Because you could say at community level, as it were, or popular level, history is very popular. Everybody's into history, generally speaking, one or two exceptions, of course. But that doesn't translate to people studying it. So why is that? So there are a range of things. One is curriculum. One is this issue of curriculum, particularly school curriculum. Because if you look at the figures, for example, even those who, anyway, without getting into this. So one thing is curriculum. The other is the issues of, perceptions about history and what it can lead to in terms of career progression and so on and so forth. There are a range of issues. There are issues relating to, which students are entered for history, for example, at GCSE, A-level, and so on and so forth. But then there are also questions about if there are 1,300 undergraduates, black undergraduates studying history, why do only 2 of them become history teachers? Or why do only 2 of them go on to do PhDs? So these things need to be investigated then a little bit. And then to take some measures, because it is important that we are in a position to change things. If we don't train more people to go into schools, or don't have an impact on the curriculum that's taught, then the same Eurocentrism is churned out year after year. More young people are miseducated and so on. And obviously not just kids of African Caribbean heritage, but all kids are miseducated. And then the whole thing is perpetuated. Teacher training, university teaching, everything is just a vicious cycle. So we have to find ways of breaking it.
I was going to ask a question when you answered it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, about the reasons why people don't why total Africans stop pursue history at PhD level. And actually I wanted to add that myself and my friends, we did history at undergraduate level, but then we switched departments. My friend did African studies and I went to the PhD department. And I don't know, maybe, yeah, like you said, it's part of the curriculum and the satisfaction is how history is taught.
Will you tell us? Why did you switch?
Yeah, because both in terms of career and also I wasn't very happy because it's mainly, at my university, it was mainly like European kind of history, and the way history is taught here, I think it doesn't really privatize Black experiences and things. So.
If you don't mind me asking, which university are you at?
Royal Holloway.
Oh, Ben.
Any more questions? I was going to say, doesn't it depend on what kind of history then? Because you're talking about standard history and then you've got art historians, design historians. Are they brought into the equation when you're thinking about history?
I'm not sure that the statistics actually, I'll have to think about this, whether statistics actually make that distinction. I have to go back to the piece of figures, but obviously in general those subjects aren't taught at school level, so we're talking about a kind of general trend, and I'm mainly talking about kind of regular history, say, rather than art history and so on. But I would imagine that the numbers, even for those more specialised subjects, are probably lower. But I'd have to go back and look at the history figures, but I don't think they include in art history would be separate from statistics we have. But art historians are welcome to come to the conference or any other kind of
I
historian.
know design historians, I don't know many art historians, but I know design historians.
Okay, well you should let them know, because it'd be good to have their experience, which may be different or similar.
I have one more question for the panel, and it's kind of comes based on discussion I had with myself and then they're closer towards finishing their PhDs, and we were just talking about figuring out trying to how to better further our prospective careers, and then we were just talking about how like some of the popular Black British scholars have had to go to the US to do whatever they need to do to come back and to be in a position that they are here. So I was just wondering what your opinions are on that, and if you've had to go outside of the UK to do stuff to further your career over here.
Well, I'm a geographer and there are hardly any black, I don't think there's a black geography professor. And I won't tell you about my experience in Oxford in regards to promotion. When I graduated, I just didn't think I would get work in the UK, and I went to the US, and as I said when I was presenting, I did a conference circuit, and I met people, and they said, well, there was a job coming up somewhere. It was at Dartmouth College, which is something you might know of in New Hampshire. And I went for the interview, and I was offered the position. And I didn't particularly want to be up in New Hampshire. Dartmouth was in the middle of nowhere. It was a university town. And while I was there, someone said, there's a job going at Loughborough here back in England. So that's how I came back. And from there, again, in fact, my former supervisor at Oxford said, there's a job going on in my department. And I thought, I'm not going to apply for it because I'm not going to get it. I know that department, they're not going to appoint me. And there was, I think a couple of days before, he rang me and said, have you applied? And I said, no. And he said, put in an application. And I put an application on the last day and sent it by DHL. But I think for me, I think I got appointed, and I really do think I got appointed because there was a progressive professor in my department, somebody called David Harvey, who's a Marxist, and he was on my appointments committee. And there were a couple of other so-called radicals on the committee. And I think that's why. I think if they weren't there, I would not have been appointed. So I think the difference about the States now is that they used to appoint black academics because they needed to satisfy PR and so on, but they didn't nurture you and they didn't support you. I think that the trend they have changed. They realize that in order to retain them, they have to start investing in them. And I think from what I gather from speaking to British academics in the States, there are more resources there because you need funding, you need money to do research and so on. And they're now, some of those universities are willing to help you in order to get to that stage. So, I mean, yeah, if you can, but I tell you, the market is really competitive everywhere. There are very few academic posts. I don't know.
Well, actually, what the theme of the conference we're having in October really is the US influence on British black studies. One, in terms of just theory in general, but two, there may actually be more British black academics in America than there are in Britain. That's how bad it is in Britain. But I think that trend is changing. I was speaking to Professor Hazel Carby, who moved to America a long, long time ago, now in Yale. And she was saying there's a lot more hostility towards British people going over to America. They're taking our jobs, kind of like the Eastern Europeans. So I think, and the competition generally in American universities is very, very high. So I don't know if it's as easy to shift over to the States. Here, I mean, I've been lucky. I worked at Newman University and now I work at Birmingham City University. And I think that's important. Is about flexibility. I mean, my degree is PhD in sociology. It allows you to be very flexible. So my first job was in working with, my first job was early childhood education and care and working with children, young people and families. Two things I don't really know anything about. I wasn't even going to apply, but I thought, I haven't got any other jobs, let me apply for this job. And got it. And so you have to be, sometimes you have to think, maybe that doesn't fit exactly what I'm going to do. But actually, once you're in to an extent, and that's allowed me to get this next job and move on. So I think you have to be flexible in what you're thinking about. And higher education in the UK is expanding a bit, right? So 20, 30 years ago, there weren't as many universities. Now, again, there's lots of bad things about marketisation. One of the good things is there are actually more jobs open. If you look now, the jobs are starting to open up a little bit. So it's not as bad as it was. It's still not great, definitely. It's not great at all, but it's not as bad as it was. Yeah. And there are things like Black Studies Association, other associations, where you are trying to create spaces to do, but it is very, very good. And if you can go abroad, definitely go abroad. But certainly what I'd say is publications are really important.
Yeah.
We just hired a couple of people in sociology at PCU, and the guy who we hired actually just finished his PhD, but he literally had his ref submission for 2020 finished. Like he had four publications by the end of the 4 publications, and he had them. And this is essentially what got him the job. Right. Now, when we're looking at hiring people, these publications are very, very, very important. You can't necessarily wait until you finish your PhD. I used to actually need to be thinking about how can you get stuff out while you're doing your PhD. That's the stuff that's going to get you shortlisted.
Yeah, I mean, I think I encourage people to stay here. Because, as I say, it's like there's a battle going on in which we need everyone to be engaged and to be knocking at the door and so on, and making up noise about this and that and so on. So I mean, people do go to all kinds of places, but I think it's good to stay here and as I say, to break in and break through and create precedents and create spaces for hopefully for other people to come through. I mean, I think as Kende says, it is important to be both prepared and flexible. You do need, if you can get, something which is, some AL post or something which is hourly paid or anything which gives you experience in teaching, you should take it at PhD level. Any opportunities of publishing, you have to take them. Any conference opportunities, it's a game, really, and you have to play that game to some extent because when a interview panel or a shortlisting panel is looking, they're basically looking to see, okay, who can we have who can hit the ground running in terms of teaching that we can put into the ref next time, And if there are 200 candidates or something, which is what they usually are, they're going to look at those who have the best CVs, the best applications, and so on. So the more that you have, if you can show you've got a lot of teaching, got publications, you're ready to rumble, then you're going to be, you're going to be looked well upon. In my own case, I remember going for an interview. And that's the other thing. If you don't apply for things, you're not going to get anything. You know, this is like a law of science. Whether it comes to jobs or funding applications, if you do not apply, you will definitely not get it. So you have to apply for everything. In my first post at Middlesex, I applied for something, a post. I didn't get it. There was an internal candidate who got the post, but they kind of liked the sound of me. You know, something. They said, oh, we'll give you a few hours. I had a few hours for like a semester. They liked me a little bit more. They said, okay, we'll give you a little fractional something. They gave me that, and then they, you know, and I became an internal candidate. So getting a foot in the door, or a foot on the land, or whatever you call it, is important. And then you can, you know, you can show people what you've got.
I think it's been a little while now, so what, 5 minutes? 5-10 minutes? We've got 15 minutes. Yeah. The whole essence of this, because we wanted people to talk to each other. So we had an icebreaker exercise, but I don't think we have enough time to go through it as we had envisaged. But I think we'll still try to give it a go, at least if we have 10 minutes of good conversation, and people swapping detail and swapping cards and like information would be a good look. But I think people have been sitting down for a little while, and there's lots of refreshments that everyone needs to consume before. So we have 5 minutes.